A sob tore through the silence. Under the harsh fluorescent lights, the sound echoed like a blade cutting straight into the heart. Alexander Carter, billionaire CEO of Carter Enterprises, froze in front of the employee's restroom door. His pulse pounded. Behind those cold, tiled walls, someone was falling apart. He wore a worn baseball cap, a cheap jacket slung over his shoulders, and not a soul suspected that he was the owner of the entire corporation. Employees passed by without a glance, assuming he was just another middle-aged man clinging to a temporary job. But Alexander knew the truth. This invisibility was the perfect disguise. He was here to observe, to test the polished reports his managers fed him. And now, that sob had shattered every so called perfect number on paper. Through the crack beneath the door, he noticed a faded name badge lying on the wet tile floor. Elena Ramirez, custodial staff. The sobs grew heavier, broken, desperate. This wasn't ordinary exhaustion. This was the sound of someone on the edge of losing everything. Alexander felt his throat tighten. Since when had the company he built on the foundation of respect for people allowed this to happen? He knocked gently. "Excuse me, are you all right?" The crying stopped instantly. Silence stretched. Then a hoarse, female voice answered, forced and trembling. I'm fine. Give me a minute." But Alexander heard the tremor in every syllable. Fine was a mask. The truth was that the woman inside was standing at the edge of collapse. The door creaked open. Elena emerged, her face swollen and red, her eyes darkened from sleepless nights. Her uniform was wrinkled, carrying the smell of cleaning chemicals. Her cracked hands shook as she picked up the badge from the floor. She bowed her head slightly, whispering as if blaming herself. "I'm sorry. I have to get back to work." Alexander saw far more than she'd tried to hide. He saw the exhaustion from endless overtime, the fear etched in the way she flinched at footsteps in the hall. For a moment, he wasn't a billionaire. He was just a man watching another human being being crushed. He forced a faint smile, hiding his true identity. "I'm Mike. Started today. If you ever need someone to talk to, I'm here." Elena lifted her eyes. They were red, but for a fleeting second, a glimmer of hope shone. Then her shoulders sagged, carrying the weight of the world. "It's just, everything is falling apart. My daughter, she needs heart surgery. I don't have the money. I don't have insurance. And now they've cut my hours too." Alexander stood, frozen. A chilling question surged through him. If here, in one of his own stores, a mother was driven to despair under his name, then what else had he missed? Under the unforgiving glare of the room, the undercover CEO understood. What he thought was a simple inspection had become a turning point. A grim secret had just been uncovered, and in the next 48 hours, he would tear the entire truth wide open. The assignment board on the wall looked like a chaotic maze, lines slashed across it, hours cut and rearranged, empty slots filled with jagged red ink. Alexander, still Mike the new hire, stood beside Elena, his eyes tracing every line. And right at the center, the name Elena Ramirez appeared again and again like an open wound. 20 hours, then 35. then suddenly dropped to 15. No pattern, no fairness. He could feel her breathing tremble next to him, as if the instability itself was eroding her spirit. "They keep changing it like this," Eleanor whispered, her voice breaking. "I don't even know if I'll be able to pay rent next week. Mr. Miller says it's company policy. But this store is always busy, always short, staffed. I don't understand." The name Gregory Miller struck Alexander's memory. A regional manager, spotless reports, impressive performance. A man the board praised for optimizing labor costs. But looking at the erratic red scribbles, Alexander understood optimization meant strangulation. He forced his voice steady, though his jaw tightened. "And health insurance? After 90 days, you should have been eligible." Elena let out a bitter laugh, the sound laced with despair. "He told me I didn't qualify because my hours were too inconsistent. But he's the one who cut them. I've worked here 3 years, never late once, and still—" A tear slipped down her cheek. She turned away, as if afraid of being seen as weak. Alexander watched her cracked hands shake as she pinned the badge back onto her shirt. A small piece of metal, but heavy as chains. It bound her to this job, bound her daughter to the fragile hope that surgery might still be possible. "And the others?" Alexander asked quietly. Elena lowered her head, almost whispering. "Tommy in electronics, Sarah in cosmetics. All of us. Mr. Miller says if we don't like it, we can leave. He'll just replace us." In that moment, Alexander felt the fire of an entrepreneur inside him fracture into fury. His whole life he believed his company was built on decency, but decency was now only ink on paper. Out here, a mother traded away her health for her child's survival, while a manager wielded power like a knife against her throat. Elena glanced at the clock. "I have to get back. My shift ends at 11 tonight, then starts again at 6 in the morning. Actually, today is a double shift, but the system only records 8 hours." She walked away, her small frame limping across the hard tile floor. Alexander stood frozen, watching. Each step she took echoed like a hammer striking his conscience. The schedule board still hung there, scarred with red marks like bleeding wounds. Every cut hour meant one less meal. Every erased line meant a family sinking deeper into despair. And all of it happened under the name Carter Enterprises, his name. Alexander clenched his fists. In his mind, one question thundered. If Eleanor was just one of dozens, or hundreds, then how deep did this rot go? He had come here to observe, but now he knew he could not just observe. The battle had begun, and the first man he needed to face was Gregory Miller. Dawn had barely broken, a pale blue light spilling through the frosted glass of the employee break room. Alexander sat in the corner, a cheap cup of coffee steaming faintly in his hand, watching as Elena walked in for her 6 a.m. shift. Her frame was small, her steps slightly uneven, yet her eyes carried a quiet resilience. Exhausted or not, she showed up. She worked, because behind her was a child waiting to be saved. At 6:47, the office door swung open. Gregory Miller strode out, early 30s, hair slicked back with gel, walking with the swagger of a man who believed the entire store existed to serve him. The badge on his chest gleamed manager, but his eyes were cooled as steel. The moment he saw Elena mopping the floor in electronics, his voice cracked like a whip. "Ramirez!" Elena froze, her shoulders trembling, but she kept her head down, continuing her work. "I'm talking to you, Ramirez. Are you deaf?" Slowly, Elena raised her head, her voice small, painfully calm. "Yes, Mr. Miller." Gregory jerked his chin toward the floor. "You call this clean? What have you been doing for the past hour? Sitting around?" Alexander looked down. The tile was so polished he could see his own reflection. Not a speck of dirt. But Elena only bowed her head. "I'll clean it again right away." "You'd better. And after that, meet me in my office." Gregory's tone hissed like a lash. Alexander had to clench his fists to stop himself from standing. He knew if he stepped in now, his disguise would shatter. He had to watch to the end, to see every angle of this man's true face. Through the frosted glass walls of the office, Alexander could make out the scene inside. Gregory lounged back in his chair, legs crossed, while Elena stood rigid, hands clasped behind her, like a recruit awaiting orders. The longer it went on, the smaller she seemed under his gaze of contempt. Beside Alexander, a young man dropped heavily into a chair, sighing. His badge read, "Tommy Chen, Electronics." "Again," Tommy muttered. "That's the third time this week." Alexander tilted his head. "He does this often?" Tommy shot him a bitter look. "To all of us, but especially people like Elena. He always reminds us, people like you immigrants, single mothers, the poor, should be grateful you even have jobs." That's his brand of cruelty. Through the glass, Alexander saw Gregory/Elena's timesheet with a red pen, each stroke like a blade. Elena's Petka's face tightened, as though she had just received another death sentence for her family's future. Tommy's voice dropped, laced with anger. "He'll cut her hours. Last week he docked Sarah in cosmetics 3 hours because she went to the bathroom too often. She's pregnant, but he wrote it down as laziness. Anyone who pushes back gets forced out. Everyone here is scared." Alexander pulled out his phone, his hand trembling slightly, but his eyes burned sharp. He switched on the recorder. Gregory's voice carried clearly enough. "If you can't handle this job, Ramirez, there are plenty waiting outside. You like stirring up complaints. Don't think I don't know. If I hear you encourage anyone else to whine, I'll cut you to 12 hours a week. Or better yet, fire you on the spot." Elena tried to speak, her voice shaking. "Please, I just need steady hours." "My daughter," Gregory cut her off, voice like ice. "Your personal problems are not my concern. In here, only my rules matter. Remember that." Outside, Alexander felt blood pounding at his temples. Inside his pocket, the recording captured every word, every threat, evidence carved in stone. But the heat surging through him was more than fury. It was shame. Shame that Miller had dared to turn Carter Enterprises into a slaughterhouse, a place where people were broken to feed his thirst for control. Elena walked out, her face pale, eyes red, yet her back remained straight as she pinned her badge once more to her chest, clinging to the last scraps of dignity. Alexander watched, his heart heavy. In his pocket, the recording was more than proof against Gregory. It was the spark of war. A war Alexander knew he could not afford to lose. Night fell over the city. The neon lights from the store's sign still blazed. But inside the cheap motel room, number 237, Alexander Carter sat surrounded by scattered files. On the table, his phone replayed the recording. Gregory Miller's voice rang out, arrogant, merciless, every word like a blade cutting into the truth. "Ramirez, 12 hours a week is already generous. Don't think I won't cut it all." Alexander clenched his fists. The room grew suffocating, not from the stale smoke left by the previous tenant, but from the weight of the truth he had just heard. This was not just a bad manager. This was a predator wearing a suit. And worse, his own system, Carter Enterprises, had sheltered him. He opened his laptop. The employee data flashed on screen. Turnover rates up 60% in 8 months. Reason listed, voluntary. Alexander's lips twisted bitterly. No one leaves voluntarily when they are hungry. They were forced out, pushed to the edge. Meanwhile, Gregory's record gleamed. Labor costs reduced. Profits increased. Not a single official complaint. Alexander understood. Gregory was clever. He had built a perfect paper wall to hide his cruelty. If the board relied on reports alone, they would see him as a rising star. But this was no longer about analysis. He needed living proof, something no one could deny. Alexander stared into the cracked bathroom mirror. No Italian suit, no billionaire CEO from magazine covers. Instead, he wore faded jeans, worn outwork boots, and a washed-out T-shirt. He practiced walking, practiced speaking like a man broken by unemployment. Mike Henderson, 40, 2 years old. Construction worker laid off. No family. Needs work. Any work. His voice low, rough, tinged with desperation. He slowed his steps, avoided eye contact, shoulders hunched. The posture of prey, the kind men like Gregory could spot instantly. The next morning, Alexander, now Mike Henderson, stood before the manager's office. The door opened. Gregory looked up, his gaze sharp as a knife. In seconds, he had categorized the man in front of him, jobless, desperate, disposable. And he smiled, the smile of a predator. "What do you need?" Gregory asked, his tone dripping with false generosity. Alexander gripped the forged file in his hand. "I heard there's an opening. I can do anything. Cleaning, lifting. I just need a chance." Gregory leaned back, eyes gleaming with amusement. "Any experience?" "Construction, but work's scarce now. I need something steady. I don't cause trouble. I work hard." The false file landed on the desk, references carefully prepared by Alexander's old friends, ready to play their part. Gregory skimmed, barely reading. Skill didn't matter to him. What he wanted was obedience. "All right, Henderson," he said with a widening grin. "You start tonight. Night shift, 10 to 6. $12 an hour. You'll be working with Ramirez. But don't let her fill your head with complaints. She has issues." Alexander lowered his head, hiding the fire in his eyes. "Yes, thank you, sir. I won't disappoint you." Gregory leaned forward, voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "I reward those who are loyal and silent, but I deal very quickly with troublemakers. Remember that." Alexander nodded, and walked out of the office. But inside he knew, in just a few hours, masks would fall. That night, Alexander stood in the employee restroom, changing into the cheap work uniform. He pinned the plastic badge, Mike Henderson, to his chest. Cold, impersonal, but the key to unlocking the darkness of truth. As he stepped out onto the floor, Eleanor spotted him, her eyes widening in surprise. "You came back?" Alexander forced a weary smile, carrying the weight of a man with nothing. "I need this job. Looks like we'll be working together." Elena gave a small nod, her gaze caught between caution and hope. "Stick close to me. And remember, when night falls, that's when Mr. Miller shows his true face." Alexander felt his chest tighten. Tonight he would not just witness it. He would live inside the hell his own company had created. And somewhere deep in his chest, the fire of resolve flared. This truth would be exposed. After closing, the store was no longer a bustling place of shopping. It transformed into a silent maze, lit only by the cold glare of fluorescent lights dripping down each aisle. The tiled floor reflected silhouettes, creating an eerie feeling as if the place were an abandoned warehouse. In that stillness, Alexander, now only Mike Henderson, stepped into his first night shift. Elena greeted him with a weary nod. Her rubber gloves were torn at the fingertips, her hands raw and blotched red from chemical burns. He noticed but said nothing, only rolling up his sleeves and murmuring, "Let's get started." The work was grueling, but Alexander did not flinch. Mopping floors, replacing toilet paper, emptying trash bins. Tasks he once only saw in polished reports were now heavy burdens pressing on his shoulders. Yet in that sweat, he began to realize the true value of every dollar these workers had to fight for. Barely an hour later, the atmosphere shifted. Footsteps echoed rhythmically from a distance. Gregory Miller. He didn't walk so much as stalk, prowling like a predator, surveying his domain. "Ramirez!" His voice cracked like a whip across the silence. Elena froze, her grip tightening on the mop. "Yes, Mr. Miller?" "This floor, look at it. Filthy. Too slow. I'm docking you half an hour." Alexander glanced down. The floor gleamed, bright enough to mirror the bulbs above. The accusation was a lie, blatant and cruel. Elena bit her lip, didn't argue, only bowed her head. For a moment, Alexander saw her shoulders tremble, then heard her whisper, "I'll do it again." Gregory typed into his phone. One line, one stolen paycheck, stolen right before their eyes. Less than an hour later, he returned with a clipboard in hand. "Henderson, Ramirez, over here." Alexander stepped forward. Gregory plastered on a false smile, his voice sugar-coated but chilling. "Good news. Starting next week, only one person is needed for the night shift. The store needs to cut costs. Ramirez, Henderson will take your place. You're done." Elena's face drained of color. "Mr. Miller, one person can't handle it. The store covers 40,000 square feet." "Don't care," Gregory snapped, raising his brow. "If you can't do it, then leave. Someone else will be grateful for the chance." Alexander felt his heart pounding. This wasn't cost-cutting. This was a deliberate squeeze, pushing workers to the point of collapse, forcing them out to slash expenses and dodge benefits. A perfect plan wrapped in the lie of efficiency. When Gregory left, Eleanor sank down beside the checkout counter, her face pale as chalk. I can't. One person can't keep up. But if I refuse, he'll cut my hours completely. My daughter. Her voice broke. Alexander set a hand on her shoulder, his voice low and steady. You are not alone. I promise. In her tear-filled eyes, for the first time, flickered a fragile spark of trust. By midnight, Alexander began noticing more disturbing patterns. Only one bottle of cleaning solution remained for the entire store. Mops used in the bathrooms were being ordered to be reused in the break room. Elena whispered, "The budget's been cut. He says we're wasting supplies." Alexander suddenly remembered the report he had once signed. This store should have 10 times the supplies on hand. Which meant the budget had arrived, but vanished straight into Gregory's pocket. The breaking point came at 3 in the morning. Gregory strode out from his office, his eyes gleaming with power. "Henderson, move all pallets from the warehouse to the floor, right now." Alexander looked at the mountain of goods stacked high, work for 4 men, now dumped onto one. He understood. This was a loyalty test, a way to crush someone's spirit. He clenched his teeth and dragged the first load. His spine screamed, sweat poured. But he kept going. Every moment of pain became living evidence. Eleanor watched him, her eyes filled with both fear and astonishment, as the new guy silently bore the weight. By 4, Alexander's hands were raw, streaked with blood. But in his chest, fury ignited into a blazing fire. This wasn't just the cruelty of one man. This was a system that allowed monsters in managerial suits to reign unchecked. And he had let it happen inside the empire he built. He knew. He needed the final proof, the killing blow that Gregory could never deny. And tonight, in the shadows of that office, Alexander was certain he would find it. 5 a.m. The air inside the store was heavy as stone. Elena was gathering cleaning supplies, her steps faltering. Alexander, still hidden under the guise of Mike Henderson, sat beside a metal trash bin, his hands raw and burning after hours of hauling boxes. But in his mind, he had never been sharper. He had watched Gregory sitting holed up in his office all night, scribbling notes and typing on his computer. The door was left ajar, a sliver of light slicing into the darkness like a blade. Alexander narrowed his eyes. What was he working on that needed such secrecy? Then the phone rang. 2 short tones, 1 long. Alexander knew that sound. Gregory picked up, his voice lowered, but the office walls were too thin. Alexander silently leaned closer, his heart hammering, his hand gripping his phone, ready to record. "Miller here. Yes, I've got this week's numbers. Ramirez down to 12 hours. Chen held at 15. That one. Sarah, the pregnant one, I've put her on inventory shift. She'll quit within the month." Alexander froze. He was listing them, one by one. A roster of prey carefully trapped. The man on the other end was muffled, indistinct, but it was clear this wasn't the first call. Gregory chuckled. "No complaints? They're too scared. I've already cleaned house. Corporate only looks at costs going down. They think I'm a genius at efficiency." Alexander pressed record. Every word spilled out like knives carving into flesh. Don't worry, I've got fake paperwork, disciplinary reports, bad attitude, tardiness. If anyone asks, I flash those and it's over. Papers rustled. And the best part? I funnel all the cut hours into my nephew's ID. Kids never set foot in the store, but pulls $800 a week. Corporate wires the money straight into the account I control. Alexander shut his eyes tight. This was it. The crime laid bare. Brazen. Mocking the law itself. Then Gregory's voice dropped colder. Ramirez is a gift. Single mom, needs insurance. Daughter needs heart surgery. I can cut her down to nothing and she'll still crawl back begging for scraps. That's the real fun. People like her are always grateful for crumbs. Alexander's chest burned, ready to explode. It took every ounce of will not to storm in and wring his neck right then. Don't worry about exposure, Gregory laughed, his chair creaking as it spun. Who's going to believe them? A bunch of immigrants, single mothers, dropouts. And me? I'm the regional manager. Spotless reports. Corporate will laugh in their faces. The final blow. A full confession. The call ended. Gregory hung up, sighed with satisfaction, and resumed typing. Alexander stepped back, his pulse pounding, the recording light flashing, every word preserved. He returned to the cleaning area. Elena was clutching her chest, gasping, struggling to drag an overstuffed trash bag. You okay? Alexander asked softly. Just tired, she whispered, her face pale, eyes ringed dark. Miller says I have to come back at 2 p.m. for inventory. I don't think I can take it anymore. Alexander clenched his fists. Every second she endured was another blade Gregory drove into a mother's heart. He crouched beside her, his voice low and strained. Elena, you need to know. Tomorrow, everything changes. I promise. She looked at him, doubt clouded with a flicker of hope. You're just the new guy. How? Alexander gave a faint smile, shadowed with resolve. Sometimes, the one everyone underestimates is the one who holds the power to change everything. 2 p.m. The store's main lobby blazed under neon lights, yet the atmosphere was suffocatingly heavy. Gregory Miller strode out, a thick clipboard in hand, his voice cracking like a whip. Listen up. Corporate is watching inventory closely, so from now on, any product loss, damage, or error will be deducted directly from your paychecks. A nervous murmur rippled through the room. Elena's eyes widened in fear, her hand clutching her worn uniform. Sarah, heavily pregnant, instinctively held her belly. Tommy lowered his head, lips pressed tight. Gregory scanned the crowd, a smug smile twisting his face. And if anyone thinks this is unfair, remember there are plenty of people out there waiting to take your place. Fear broke out in the eyes of the staff, but from the back of the group, a deep voice rose, calm, steady, resolute. Actually, the greatest injustice here isn't what you just said. All eyes turned to Alexander, the new employee in his faded janitor's shirt. He stepped forward slowly, his gaze fixed on Gregory. What? Henderson, what are you trying to say? Gregory snapped, his voice strained, trying to keep control. Alexander stopped at the center of the circle of employees, He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. The screen lit up. A voice filled the silence, the shrill, arrogant, disdainful voice of Gregory himself. Ramirez down to 12 hours. Chen stays at 15. Sarah, I'll put her on inventory until she quits. All the cut hours go under my nephew's ID. Kid never worked a day here but still gets 800 a week. The sound echoed through the stillness. The staff raised their heads, their eyes wide in shock. Elena covered her mouth, tears welling. Gregory's face drained of color as he shouted, "This is illegal recording! It won't hold up!" Alexander raised his head, his voice cold as steel. The state of Michigan allows one-party consent recordings. Perfectly legal. And what is illegal, Gregory, is stealing wages, stripping health care, and harassing employees. Angry whispers surged like a wave. Tommy clenched his fists. Sarah's eyes welled with tears, and Elena trembled, caught between pain and relief. Gregory staggered back, his voice breaking. "Who do you think you are too?" Alexander cut him off, his eyes blazing, pulling a golden badge from his pocket, engraved with the company's logo. He raised it high, his voice thundering like a storm. "I am Alexander Ward, CEO and owner of Ward Enterprises, and Gregory Miller, you are fired, effective immediately." The lobby erupted. Gasps, shouts of "Oh my God" and "No way" filled the air. Elena dropped her mop, covering her face with both hands. Tommy stood frozen, mouth agape. Gregory broke into a manic laugh. "No, you need me. I'm the best manager you've got. Corporate always praises me." Alexander strode forward, fury burning in his eyes, his voice reverberating through every ear. "Corporate praised numbers you forged on the backs of your employees. You're not a manager, you're a thief. And today, your lies end." At that moment, 2 security officers in black suits stepped in, moving toward Gregory. "Mr. Miller, you need to come with us. You are under investigation for wage theft and insurance fraud." Gregory thrashed in panic, screaming, "You'll regret this, I'll sue, I'll—" Alexander's gaze bore into him, his voice dropping low, sharp as a blade. "You can try. But you forgot one crucial thing. This is my company, and justice will stand with the people you trampled." Gregory was dragged out under the burning stares of resentment and relief from the staff. A dark chapter ended before their very eyes. Alexander turned to face the exhausted, trembling workers, whose eyes now glimmered with hope. He drew a deep breath, his voice booming with sincerity. "I'm sorry for letting you endure this for so long. But starting today, everything changes. I promise." The moment Gregory was dragged away, the entire lobby of the store fell into a dead silence. Only the echo of security boots striking the cold tile floor remained. The employees looked at one another, their eyes filled with confusion, mingled with hope. They could hardly believe that the man who had mopped the floors with them the night before was in fact the CEO, the owner of the entire corporation. Alexander stood in the center of the circle of workers, his gaze sweeping across each face. Eyes lined with exhaustion and doubt stared back at him, as if they still did not dare to dream that they had finally stepped out of the shadows. He drew a deep breath, his voice low but resonant, each word slicing through the air. "None of you will lose your jobs. On the contrary, from today we begin to make things right. Every dollar stolen from your wages will be returned. Every benefit stripped from you will be restored. This is my commitment. I am Alexander Ward." A choked sob broke out. Eleanor clutched her faded name tag to her chest, tears streaming down her face as she stammered, Does that mean my daughter's surgery?" Alexander turned directly toward her, his eyes firm yet gentle. "It will be fully covered. Starting today, Human Resources will file your insurance paperwork. Your daughter will have the chance to live the way she should have long ago." Elena collapsed to her knees, shoulders shaking, crying and laughing at once. Tommy rushed to support her, while Sarah, heavy with pregnancy, covered her mouth as she sobbed. Alexander gave a signal. From the doorway, 3 senior staff members in tailored suits entered, carrying laptops and thick files. Rebecca Liu, head of Human Resources, nodded to him. "Rebecca," Alexander said firmly, "I want an immediate audit of every employee file. Any hours cut illegally, any wages stolen, must be reimbursed within 48 hours. Benefits, paid leave, maternity leave, everything must be reinstated at once." Rebecca immediately began assigning tasks. The HR team spread out, setting up their computers right there in the break room. Screens lit up, names appearing one by one. Maria Elena Ramirez, Tommy Chen, Sarah Collins, each name accompanied by the wages withheld and the hours unjustly cut. "Ramirez Elena," Rebecca announced, her voice steady. "You have been eligible for full-time status for 34 consecutive months. The wages stolen and unpaid hours total $14,800. This amount will be deposited into your account within 48 hours. Elena broke down into sobs, her entire body trembling as if she could not believe it. Sarah stepped forward, worry clouding her face. "And me? I'm about to give birth. If I take leave now, won't I be fired?" Rebecca scanned quickly through her records, then looked up with a reassuring smile. "No. Effective today, you are officially on paid maternity leave. You will retain all benefits, and your position will be waiting for you after the baby is born." Sarah clutched her belly, her tears spilling freely as her shoulders shook with relief. Tommy clenched his fists, hesitated, then asked, "And what about us? The ones who are just ordinary workers? Do we have any other chance?" Alexander stepped closer, placing a firm hand on the young man's shoulder. "Tommy, you've dreamed of becoming a manager, haven't you? Starting today, you will be trained as an assistant store manager, not because of a degree, but because you've proven you care about others. That is the true qualification." Tommy froze, his eyes lighting up like a child seeing his dream take form for the first time. The employees exchanged glances, their tears mixing with smiles. The air that had once been thick with fear now shattered into gasps of relief, sobs of release, and trembling laughter. Alexander raised the golden CEO badge high, his voice ringing out. "This is not just a store. This is a family. And I promise, from today forward, Ward Enterprises will never again allow another Gregory Miller to turn this place into a nightmare. You will be heard. You will be respected. And you will live as the human beings you deserve to be." In that moment, Those who had once felt the most hopeless suddenly saw a future opening before their very eyes. 3 weeks after the scandal, the store that had once been suffocated under Gregory Miller's rule had transformed almost beyond recognition. From the outside, it still looked like an ordinary supermarket with its weathered sign and the constant flow of shoppers. But inside, the atmosphere was entirely different. The first thing Alexander noticed during his field visit was the sound. Gone were the hurried footsteps, the weary sighs, and the constant oppressive silence. Instead, the hallways now echoed with lively conversations, occasionally bursting into genuine laughter. In the employee break room, he saw Tommy standing at a whiteboard, passionately explaining the inventory system to 2 new hires. He no longer hung his head low but stood tall, marker in hand, his voice clear and confident. "Here, accuracy matters more than speed. One small mistake in the numbers can cause major losses, so take your time. And remember, everyone has the right to ask if something isn't clear. No one will yell at you anymore." The new employees nodded, their eyes shining, as if they were being taught by a true mentor. On the wall, a wooden plaque read, "Assistant Manager of the Month, Employee Choice," neatly engraved with the name Tommy Chen. Alexander smiled quietly. Passing the customer service desk, he saw Sarah, now 8 months pregnant, assisting an elderly customer with an exchange. Her face glowed with calm and patience, her eyes serene. There was no longer any trace of the fear of being fired for becoming a mother. The paid maternity leave policy Alexander had implemented had already spread to many other stores across the system, and even some competitors had begun to follow suit. One small change had sparked a massive domino effect. But the most striking transformation was in the manager's office. Elena sat behind the old wooden desk, now covered with a shining glass top, her eyes fixed on her laptop screen. No longer in the drab grey uniform that reeked of chemicals, she now wore a simple navy blazer. The faded name tag was gone, replaced with a new one, Elena Ramirez, store manager. Alexander stepped in, knocking lightly on the door. Elena looked up, her eyes brighter than ever. "Mr. Ward, I still can't get used to calling you Alexander." He chuckled, pulling up a chair across from her. "Then call me Alex. The real manager here is you." Elena blushed, but quickly regained the focus of someone carrying real responsibility. Behind her, pinned to the board, were rows of charts, employee satisfaction scores, customer revenue, service feedback. All of them were rising sharply. "We've implemented Tommy's idea of rotating employees through different departments to build new skills. Everyone feels more motivated. Sarah set up an online customer feedback system where customers can rate their experience immediately after shopping. And you won't believe this," Elena pointed at the chart. "In 3 weeks, customer satisfaction has risen by 47%, and profits have gone up by 23%. Alexander sat in silence for a long moment. Those numbers were what he had chased all his life. But never before had they been tied to the faces of workers, the same people who once cried in the bathroom, trembling from having their hours stolen. "And Sophia?" he asked softly. Elena's smile bloomed brighter than ever. "She had her surgery last week. The doctors said her heart is stronger than most children her age. She said she wants to meet Uncle Alex, the man who saved her mother's job." Alexander's chest tightened. For the first time in years, he felt it clearly. His greatest achievement was not on the stock exchange, but in the beating heart of a child given the chance to live. As he left the office, he paused at the work schedule pinned to the wall. No longer a chaotic mess of red slashes and erasures, it was now a clear, transparent timetable laid out 3 weeks in advance. Beside it, employees had pinned photos from their very first family day picnic. Everyone was smiling brightly, holding up a hand. Painted banner, "Best place to work, voted by us." Alexander stood there for a long time. Just a month ago, that board had been a symbol of despair. Now, it was a symbol of trust and new beginnings. He whispered softly to himself, "This is the legacy I was meant to leave behind." 6 months after that fateful night, Alexander Ward stood on the brightly lit wooden stage of the National Retail Federation Hall. Before him, thousands of executives, managers, and investors watched intently. But in their eyes, there was more than just curiosity about a billionaire CEO. There was the anticipation of a story that had spread across America. He opened the first slide. It was not a revenue chart or a stock performance graph. On the giant screen was a grainy security camera photo. Eleanor Ramirez in her gray uniform, hands trembling as she picked up her fallen name tag from the wet floor. "This," Alexander began slowly, his voice measured, "was the moment I realized I no longer had control over the company I founded. We cannot call it success when employees have to cry in bathroom stalls just to survive." The hall fell silent. Alexander continued, recounting the story of Brad Miller, of stolen work hours, stripped benefits, and single mothers pushed to the brink. Then he played the recording. Brad's voice, sharp and arrogant, echoed through the hall. "The Santos woman is the perfect target." A wave of shock rippled through the audience. But Alexander did not stop at outrage. He clicked to the next slide. Elena, now in a navy blazer, her new name tag gleaming with the words, "Store Manager." Employee satisfaction had reached 94%. Revenue had risen by 23%. Customer loyalty was stronger than ever. "We have proven," he declared firmly, "that when you treat people right, profits will follow. This is not just ethics. This is business strategy." Applause thundered through the hall, but Alexander raised his hand for silence. The final slide appeared. A group photo of the entire store team, proudly holding a handmade banner that read, "Best place to work. Voted by us." His voice softened. "This is the greatest award of my life. Not given by any panel of judges, but by people who were once hopeless, now finding their laughter again." From the front row, Elena looked up at the stage. Her eyes no longer carried exhaustion, but faith. Tommy, Sarah, and many others had now become symbols of a new company, one where the voices of employees had become its strength. Alexander ended with a question, directed not just to the audience before him, but to everyone watching on television. Right now, someone might be crying in the bathroom of your company. The question is, do you hear them? And more importantly, do you dare to act? The hall erupted in applause, a roar that would not cease. But for Alexander, the true victory was not in the cheers, but in the change that had begun. Outside, the entire retail industry had started talking about the Employee Certified Fairness seal, an initiative proposed by Elena herself and now embraced by multiple corporations. Millions of workers had the chance to be protected. That night, back in his office, Alexander called Elena. Her voice came through the line, joyful yet steady. Sophia is healthy now, and another company just reached out. They want to adopt the employee council model we've built. Alexander smiled, gazing out over the Detroit skyline. The city lights shimmered like thousands of opportunities being lit all at once. He whispered, "Change has begun, from a single bathroom door into an entire movement." And in that moment, he knew. His greatest legacy was not a billion-dollar empire, but one simple principle. When you listen and act for people, everything changes. In business as in life, true strength does not lie in power written on paper, but in the ability to listen and to stand up for the vulnerable. Alexander Ward proved that when you value people over profit, everything changes. If you believe that fairness can create real strength, hit like and subscribe to help us share more inspiring stories. And don't forget to leave a comment with the words "People First," because sometimes just one small action is enough to change an entire system.